Do you know who can be truly perilous? It's someone who has been deceived for a long time and then uncovers the truth. Sadly, I never even suspected that my wife could be unfaithful to me. Was I really that oblivious? It's tough to perceive things accurately when it seems like everyone is against you and concealing a dreadful secret. Darn it, at last I have the house to myself, the game on the large TV, 2 chilled drinks consumed, and more ready in the mini cooler next to my comfortable chair. And now someone is calling. I hope it's not one of those bothersome sales calls or an automated call. If it is, they're going to get a piece of my mind. It was about 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night. My wife Tracy usually works late on Wednesdays, so I always planned for a night of relaxation or entertainment. Tonight was meant for staying in. I had finished a medium meats pizza from Papa John's earlier with a couple of beers, then settled in to watch the Cubs game while enjoying a few more Coronas. I had 2 more Coronas cooling in the cooler beside me and another 6 in the fridge in the kitchen. It promised to be a great night. Tracy would typically come home around 10, take a quick shower, and then we'd snuggle up by 11. Wednesday nights were peaceful at the Avenels. However, this phone call was sure to disrupt my peace. I could just feel it. Despite that, I answered, knowing my responsibility. It was Shell Tremaine, the wife of Tracy's boss Jack, who called. She sounded really upset. Jack had a heart attack while working with Tracy. My wife, who called 911, the paramedics took him to the hospital in critical condition. Shell told me Tracy went with Shell in the ambulance and would need a ride home later because she planned to stay with him as long as necessary. I promised Shell I would come and wish Jack a speedy recovery. Tracy had been employed by Jack for 22 years since she graduated from college. She started at his software company and worked her way up, becoming his trusted assistant. They were very close, almost like family. When Tracy started working for Jack, we were already together. We spent time with their family over the years. Tracy always spoke highly of Jack, saying he was a generous boss who compensated her well. Jack, a French national, is a decade older than both Tracy and me. Currently, at the age of 55, he maintains a fit physique through regular workouts and exudes charisma, often drawing attention in social settings where both men and women are attracted to him. Despite our belief in a higher plan for everyone, regardless of personal care, I was taken aback by Jack's sudden heart attack. Arriving at the hospital, I parked in the visitor's lot adjacent to the emergency room and asked about Jack at the front desk, explaining that I was the spouse of the woman who had accompanied him and that I was also looking for her. While speaking with the nurse, I noticed a pair of EMTs nearby, one of whom made a cryptic remark about a cuck, leaving me puzzled but ultimately focused on finding Tracy. Shortly afterward, Tracy and Shell emerged from a room, visibly upset, and we shared a tearful embrace as Tracy delivered the devastating news of Jack passing due to a massive heart attack. I stood in shock, unable to speak as the 3 of us hugged tightly in the hallway, both women crying heavily. Shell, also a citizen of France, had been married to Jack for 35 years. They tied the knot at the age of 20 and moved to this country when Jack secured a position with an American software company at the dawn of the computer era. They have a daughter named Amy, who is 3 years older than my daughter Allison, aged 18. The resemblance between the girls is striking enough to mistake them for siblings. Jack held Amy dear, and I couldn't help but think this would be especially hard on her. Just then, one of the EMTs approached me and inquired if I was Tracy's husband. Confirming, I accepted Tracy's purse, which she had left in the ambulance upon arriving at the hospital. Distancing myself from the tearful women, I took it in my left hand, expressing gratitude, and shook the EMT's hand with my right. As I began to loop the strap of the purse to store it, I noticed something peculiar, a bra nestled in the middle. Puzzled, I took a closer look and indeed found a bra hidden inside the purse among the clutter of the women's items. When they came out of the room, I hadn't really paid much attention to Tracy's appearance. It then dawned on me that she was indeed not wearing a bra, which seemed strange. I thought to myself, I'm not sure how much longer we stayed at the hospital with Chell before she decided it was time to leave. Amy was expected to arrive from university in the morning, prompting Chell to prioritize getting some rest. I drove Chell home and then took Tracy and myself back to our place. I planned to help both women retrieve their cars the next day, Chell's from the emergency room parking lot and Tracy's from her office parking lot. When we arrived home, Tracy didn't say a word to me. She went straight to the main bathroom and took a shower. About 20 minutes later, she joined me in the living room, her eyes swollen red from crying. Sitting on the couch, she seemed upset, so I left my armchair and joined her, holding her tightly. Her breathing was uneven, and I could feel her body shaking with sobs. I wanted to ask about the bra-less incident, especially since she was supposed to be working with Shai, but I couldn't bring myself to mention it that night. Instead, I silently held her for another 20 minutes until she mentioned she was tired and went to bed. It was midnight, so I decided to go to bed as well. The next morning, I took a personal day, and after freshening up, I offered to drive Tracy to her office to pick up her car. However, she appeared visibly upset and struggled to speak clearly before composing herself. She asked me to take her to Chel's place instead, where they would arrange a taxi to go to the office to collect some of Jaya's belongings. Tracy planned to then drive Chel to the hospital to manage paperwork and collect Jacka's personal effects. But despite offering my help, she declined. This was convenient for me because I needed to locate the paramedics who had assisted the previous night and clarify some details. After dropping Tracy off at Chel's house and getting a brief update on Chel's condition, I headed straight to the hospital. I quickly obtained the names of the paramedics and found them at the fire station. They remembered me from the previous night. I spoke with the one who had handed me Tracy's purse gauge and inquired about the origins of the emergency. He seemed uncertain. My wife and Jack were supposed to be picked up from the hotel, but you didn't, right? I asked. Is that why you called me? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean anything by it, he replied, sounding distressed. We've had situations before where people in a hotel room weren't who they claimed to be, and we were blamed when things went wrong. Don't shoot the messenger. Take it easy, Gage, I'm not trying to blame you. I just want the truth. I had to look up Cuck and I wasn't pleased with what I discovered. But that's not your problem. It becomes my problem if you lie about where you picked them up. We started at the Westside Hotel, Gage responded. They were about 15 minutes into the drive when the guy collapsed and fell on your wife. She had to push him off to call 911, and in the meantime she performed CPR. He was barely alive when we reached the ER. I had discovered the truth, needing no additional proof, and after thanking them, I left, aware of their sympathetic looks following me as I walked away. On the drive home, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Tracy had been deeply connected with Shaq when he almost lost his life to a heart attack. How long had this deception lasted? Then, suddenly, an insight hit me forcefully. Allison and Amy, looking remarkably alike, was not just a random similarity, they were indeed sisters. Tracy had been hiding this relationship for no less than 19 years. How had I been so blind all this time? I scolded myself for my blind trust in Tracy and Jack, who often stayed late at work, sometimes enjoyed evenings out with friends, and went on business trips together. Were there secret meetings during these times? How could Chel have been so unaware, despite my occasional ignorance? Her lack of awareness seemed unlikely, especially given the pronounced resemblance between our daughters. Chel often visited Jack's workplace, appearing amiable with Tracy. How could Tracy deceive her in such a manner? When I reached home, Tracy's car was already in the garage. I found her in the living room drinking wine, and my displeasure was apparent. "What's bothering you, darling?" she asked innocently. Despite my intention to stay calm, rage took over. "How long have you been seeing Shaq?" I demanded, my voice seething with anger. "He's Allison's father. Isn't he?" Tracy's wine glass crashed as she jumped up from the couch in a panic. "How could you say something so horrible?" she yelled. "Ick," moving towards me with intense fury. If looks could kill, her stare would have finished me then and there. Yet I stood my ground unwavering, meeting her eyes with resolve. Though I lowered my tone to almost a whisper, my words were cutting as I declared, "You can ask anything of me, but don't dare lie and tell me I'm mistaken. If you do, I'll make sure you regret it." In our 20 years together, and even before, I had never spoken to my wife so harshly or threatened her in any way. Her response was utter astonishment. She stood motionless, speechless due to the gravity of my words. She stepped back, perhaps sensing my seriousness. "You know what you've done," I stated, observing her as she sat down again, oblivious to the wine stain on the carpet. "The tension from your affair and the pressure it placed on him likely contributed to his demise. Honestly, I'm amazed it didn't happen earlier, given your deep involvement." She appeared genuinely distressed, and it was evident that my words struck a chord. She glanced down at her hands, twiddling her fingers for what seemed a long while, though it was likely only a few seconds. "Oh my God, do you think I caused his death?" she whispered. "I wonder if Chel thinks so too." Did she know about it? She knew and supported us almost from the beginning, Tracy confessed softly. She even joined us sometimes, particularly on business trips. She always thought it was appropriate for me to seek happiness with Jack because he was integral to his business success. She was glad that I supported him at work while she looked after him at home. I sank into a chair, feeling dizzy and confused, realizing I was the only one left out of the loop. What about Allison? Allison has been aware for 4 years, and she's fine with it, I exclaimed, shocked. Oh God, does Chell know that Allison is Shaq's child? Chell knows, and she's okay with it. Amy knows as well, I remarked bitterly, thinking they all must have laughed at naive old Rick. Even my daughter, his daughter, I suppose, knew and said nothing. Great. I stormed out of the house and ended up driving to a nearby park, where I just sat for several hours. Tracy tried calling me a few times, but I ignored her calls, letting them go to voicemail. I just sat there, pondering. Despite considering myself smart, I felt utterly foolish when it came to Tracy. I never even entertained the idea that she might be unfaithful. I'd blindly trusting her for nearly 19 years. I was completely in the dark. I couldn't help but wonder if there were others besides Shaq. My mind was overwhelmed with thoughts as evening fell. I left the park and made my way home. Upon entering the home via the garage, I spotted a dim light in the kitchen above the table. Tracy was seated in her regular place with a cup of tea. She offered me one, but I refused and chose something stronger from my liquor cabinet. After pouring myself a scotch, I sat down in my chair opposite her. I can't even begin to express how sorry I am for hurting you, Tracy said softly, her eyes fixed on her hands. I need to hear the whole truth, I replied, my voice filled with frustration. You need to explain how you could betray me while professing to love me. You need to tell me if you ever truly loved and respected me. Don't you dare question my love for you, Tracy interjected urgently. I've always loved you, still do. It's just that I also love Jack. Some people think you can only love one person at a time, but I know that's not true because I love both of you. Just get on with it, I said, devoid of emotion. Tracy had joined Softel when the company was nearly a year old. Like many small companies, the small team wore multiple hats, worked long hours, and formed close emotional bonds. It was an exciting time for her, and she often shared the challenges during our dates. Our relationship began about a year before she joined Softel. As Softel grew and thrived, Tracy became Jack's indispensable right-hand person while Jack was the dynamic face of the company. Tracy essentially acted as the binding force holding everything together. She was adept at managing multiple responsibilities, and Jack increasingly depended on her as his essential partner. Interestingly, as Tracy and I grew closer personally, the bond between Tracy and Jack also strengthened at work. Tracy noted that her personal and professional lives were evolving side by side. Although Tracy and Jack maintained professionalism in front of their colleagues, privately they became even closer, discussing everything from everyday topics to intimate subjects like sex and politics. Tracy, at 24, was strikingly attractive with an athletic build and long blonde hair, while Jack, at 34, was a robust man with long wavy brown hair and a charismatic smile, exuding a nearly old-world charm. Their first intimate moment, Tracy recalled, occurred naturally on an old sofa in Jack's office after a long day. Tracy confessed she never felt guilty about being intimate with both me and Jack even after I married her a year later. It wasn't just physical attraction, but a deep, loving connection, distinct yet comparable to what she and I shared. However, Tracy felt unable to share this part of her life with me because of my firm stance against infidelity. She valued both relationships and couldn't bear to lose either, while I remained oblivious to the affair. She learned about it from Jack approximately 2 months later. Realizing that the affair would continue, Jack felt it necessary to be completely honest with his wife, who had just given birth to their first child. According to Tracy, Jack told Chell that, although Chell and Amy would always be his primary concern, he wanted to keep a part of his affection for Tracy. Subsequently, Chell invited Tracy to spend a weekend with Jack and herself. I remember Tracy leaving for the weekend, claiming her mother was ill, and after that weekend she sanctioned the affair. Years later, when Tracy became pregnant, it was Chell who soothed her anxiety and decided on the next steps. If the child was indeed Jack's, given that both Jack and I had a blood, determining paternity was straightforward. Moreover, since I rarely spent time alone with both girls, any comments about their similarity were casually brushed aside by either Chell or Tracy with a joke about my social life, thus avoiding any suspicion. Tracy mentioned that Chell treated her almost like a younger sister and took pride in what she described as Jack's little family. I sat in stunned silence as Tracy detailed her experiences without showing any regret for her actions, merely recalling events. Tracy ceased waiting for me to respond. The only thought that occurred was to inquire if she and Jack had ever paused when we were newlyweds and engaging in intimacy almost daily. She appeared uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze before ultimately acknowledging they hadn't. She recalled that period in my life was thrilling. I had two appealing men who adored and desired me, and I was constantly aroused. She discussed her cleanliness routine on days she was intimate with Shaq, ensuring she was fresh but conscious of the potential of being with me later. She mentioned she aimed to reduce any overlap but confessed she never allowed me to touch her intimately after. Being with Jack. You were quite considerate, I muttered. She pondered and mentioned, it's peculiar. After all this time, I never really compared your performance in bed. Both of you were great lovers, caring, attentive, and similar in stature. It wasn't about who was better with Shaq. It was just different. She acknowledged feeling somewhat relieved, knowing her bond with Jack was not solely based on passion, but it pained her to realize she harbored feelings for him as well as for me. I always believed in monogamy, the concept of having one sole partner for each individual, yet despite being her primary partner, she harbored feelings for another as well. Tracy set her tea down and gazed deeply into my eyes, as though trying to peer into my soul. I contemplated but had no reply to her unvoiced query and found no profound words to utter. Stowing my water bottle in the cupboard, I placed my glass in the sink and ascended the stairs to bed, perplexed by this action as I was sure I wouldn't rest that night. Roughly 5 minutes later, Tracy joined me in bed, cuddling against my back. I feigned sleep, choosing not to share even a simple good night. I awoke at my usual time of 5 a.m., followed my regular morning ritual, and left for work while Tracy remained asleep, indicating she had no plans of waking soon. Presumably, she and Chell would need to address the situation after Shaq's departure, but that was their issue. Clearly, I had my own matters to attend to. Work has always been my refuge during troubled times, and I hoped this pattern would continue. I am employed at Mayon Pharmaceuticals, where I am the Vice President of Sales. Even at 45, I am considered part of the new wave in the industry with my background in chemistry, giving me a distinct insight into our products' manufacturing processes and capabilities unlike many of my years in sales leadership. In fact, I was involved in developing one of our successful products, Crazol, a pill intended to diminish women's libido for those experiencing excessive sexual desires. It has been a profitable endeavor for us, and I have personally reaped benefits from its success. I also earn a significant salary, and combined with Tracy's earnings, we lived very comfortably in a stylish home, owned 2 high-end vehicles, and enjoyed splendid vacations. Financially, neither of us would struggle post-divorce. There, I admitted it, the dreaded divorce word. I hadn't seriously contemplated it until that moment, perhaps because it felt inevitable to me ever since discovering Tracy's unfaithfulness. With Allison at college and out of the house, there was really no compelling reason for us to stay together, aside from the fact that Tracy shattered my heart. This shouldn't be such a major issue. My boss, Arnold Kramer, and I have collaborated for 18 years after I spent 5 years as a chemist at another pharmaceutical company. I met Arnold at an industry convention where we discussed various topics. He suggested I venture into sales and subsequently offered me a position in his company. Intrigued by the challenge, I accepted. Arnold's assessment of my abilities proved entirely accurate, and both of us have benefited greatly from it. Not only do we maintain a productive professional relationship, but I have also found that he is a genuinely good individual, and we have developed what I expect to be a lifelong friendship. Arnold has been married to his wife, Lauren. For about 30 years he has 2 adult children and, correcting earlier, 5 grandchildren. Despite being 52, he maintains the vigor of someone considerably younger. He possesses sharp intelligence and is not reluctant to bring other wise people onto his team. I like to think I am one of them. Aerie seemed genuinely worried when I told him about Tracy's unfaithfulness and my plan to divorce her. He asked if I was sure about her disloyalty, to which I confirmed without going into details. He honored my need for time to think and strategize, and provided me with the contact information for Mayon's attorney. Aerie values loyalty to those who serve him well and trusts my own team, particularly their divorce department, which handles affluent clients. He mentioned I could take as much time as needed, but I expressed that I would only be away occasionally since the case appeared straightforward. We both desired what was best for our daughter Allison, and since we had separate retirement plans, dividing the proceeds from the house sale would be straightforward. Wow, did I completely overlook that when I arrived home. From work, Tracy had prepared dinner, my favorite, spaghetti supreme, and opened a fine bottle of Mero. Everything seemed so perfect that I hesitated to tell her that Jack was the wine expert I preferred. I favored stronger beverages. It's difficult to keep everything organized when you're managing multiple relationships. Tracy maintained her usual lively conversation during dinner, acting as if nothing had changed between us. I waited for about 10 minutes before cutting through the pretense, finally saying those dreaded 4 words, "We need to talk." "No, we don't," she retorted almost immediately. I was surprised by her response and her tone. I had uncovered, and she had admitted to, a decades-long affair with her boss. She knew my strong feelings about infidelity. How could she expect me to forgive her? I was hoping we could discuss this like adults before I proceed. With legal action, I stated as calmly as possible. "You can do whatever you want, but I won't give you a divorce," she declared, sounding irritated. "The truth is, you love me, and I love you, and I won't let you leave. I'll fight against it all the way. You're being foolish and risking losing the best thing you've ever had just because your ego is wounded." I tried to reply, but she interrupted me before I could. "Before you found out about Shaq and me, did I ever give you a reason to doubt my affection for you? Did I ever mistreat you? You received all the affection you desired from me, and I looked after you in every way, physically, mentally, emotionally. Aren't we each other's closest companions? If you hadn't discovered by accident, you would have remained deeply in love with me forever. You would have been oblivious. Can't we go back to that?" "No, because I did find out. Your love for me isn't as sincere as you claim, because otherwise you wouldn't have been with another man, both physically and emotionally. You knew it was wrong, so you hid it from me. I don't consider 2 decades of deception as love. It's bad enough that you've been with another man for 20 years, but you admit to loving him as well. You've shared intimacy with him just as you have with me. How does that show love for me? Let's disregard the physical aspect for a moment, if that's even possible. Can't you see that every bit of affection you gave him was taken from me? I had more than enough love for both of you," Tracy shouted back at me. "He understood that, but I knew you wouldn't, so I never told you. And now you're proving me right. He understood that I wasn't capable of understanding, because I wouldn't have tolerated you having another partner and quasi-spouse. That's complete nonsense. I wasn't naive enough to let you do that willingly, so you made the decision entirely for yourself, solely for yourself. This was all about your aspirations and whether you could achieve them. Trust me, if I hadn't found out, I would have lived my life happily unaware, the greatest fool imaginable. You could have inscribed it on my tombstone: "Here lies Rick Avondale, the world's most content fool." He believed life was flawless because he was oblivious, and his wife had 2 spouses. The viewing and funeral were held 3 days later on a Monday, but I attended neither. Instead, I continued with my usual routine, going to work as on any other morning. Upon returning home, I saw Tracy and Allison still dressed in their funeral clothes in the kitchen. My daughter had returned from university for the event. When I approached her for a hug, she recoiled from my touch, turning away and quietly crying, silently signaling me to keep my distance. Normally, I would have heeded the situation and withdrawn, but these were no ordinary circumstances. Frustration surged within me, audibly growling under my breath. I quickly gathered some essentials, packed a bag, and left without saying more. Tracy began bombarding my phone with calls almost immediately after I left, all of which I ignored. Allison, to her credit, didn't soften her stance. She had made up her mind, casting me as the antagonist in this drama, and appeared determined to make me feel the consequences. In that moment, it became devastatingly clear that she no longer saw me as her father, neither genetically nor emotionally. It was a harsh realization. The next day, I took some personal time to go to the bank and separate our finances, closing our joint credit cards and opening new ones solely in my name. I also scheduled a meeting with the lawyer recommended by Ari, setting it for Thursday. When I met with the lawyer, whose name was Mike Squelch, I had been awake for 3 days straight. Despite his name, which did not inspire much confidence in his legal capabilities, I was too tired to expect an extensive discussion. I provided him with a detailed rundown of the situation and stated my intention to dissolve the marriage quickly, claiming my rightful share. Moreover, I pursued child support from Jack's estate for our daughter. If she was no longer my responsibility, then her biological father should shoulder the financial obligation. I informed Mike that I was done being exploited. Mike seemed to agree with my approach, but cautioned that if Tracy contested the divorce, it could result in mandatory counseling and extended legal proceedings. Undeterred, I instructed him to proceed. Tracy was served with the divorce papers at her workplace, and judging by the timing, I assumed she received them at 10:07 a.m. Based on her reaction, as just a minute later, our receptionist informed me of an irate call from Tracy on line 3. Throughout the week, I had intentionally ignored Tracy's calls and messages on my phone, instructing the office staff to redirect her calls to my voicemail, a directive they diligently followed. However, I realized that avoiding her indefinitely was impractical. Therefore, I instructed Marley, our chief receptionist, to direct her calls straight to me. Upon contact, she blurted, "You insufferable jerk." I promptly ended the call after her initial outburst. 15 seconds later, the second call came through. "Don't you dare hang up on me." I disconnected the call once again, wondering how long it would take for her to grasp the need for civility if she desired to communicate with me. The third call took a bit longer to materialize. When I responded, she spoke in a subdued voice, clearly struggling to keep her calm. "You've won this round. We need to talk," she declared. "Wonderful," I replied, with feigned enthusiasm. "Contact my lawyer, Mike S.Q. Welch, to set up a meeting with us. It would be wise for you to bring your own lawyer, too. It might speed things up." The meeting was fixed for 2 weeks later. Until then, I stayed at a nearby motel, occasionally visiting my former home to cut the grass, collect mail, and gather some of my personal items. When Tracy saw me arriving at the house for the first time, she tried to greet me as though I were her long-missed husband and embraced me in the driveway. I stepped back and went into the house. "You didn't need to broadcast our issues in the driveway like that," she commented. "If I'm such a terrible person, why not just divorce me?" I retorted, harshly. The discussion with the attorneys took place on a Friday afternoon at 3. Being courteous, I allowed Tracy to state her case first. She talked about her full love for me, but admitted she also held a place in her heart for Jack. She argued that since he had passed away, everything should now be about me. "Are you prepared to discard 20 years of marriage over this?" she inquired. "Do you truly care so little about our love?" "No," I answered. "It's precisely because I cared so deeply about our love that this marriage must end. You had all my affection and you manipulated me to gain it. How can I not view this as a breach of my trust, which is the foundation of marriage? You knew what you were doing was wrong. Yet you proceeded to achieve what you desired, both physically and emotionally. He was aware of it and accepted it, while I was deceived. This divorce isn't due to me, it's due to your selfishness and betrayal. I would never have accepted sharing you physically with another man. But sharing your love with another man is even more unacceptable. It hurts more than if you had simply had a fleeting affair with someone else. You loved him, were intimate with him, and even bore his child. Just because I was unaware does not make it acceptable. You both deceived me. It's lucky he succumbed to a heart attack that day, because if not, I might have ended him," I declared. Tracy gasped as my final words struck her. Tears were already flowing down my cheeks. "Throughout all this, you never once apologized for being unfaithful," I continued. "You apologized for causing me pain and perhaps for being caught, but I doubt you're genuinely sorry for your actions. Rick, I believe we can fix our relationship." "Please, let's not proceed with the divorce," she implored. "Our relationship, Tracy? It was our marriage. There shouldn't have been your part and my part. It was meant to be just us." Forever. Mike glanced at Tracy's lawyer and said, "I think we're done here." Tracy's lawyer, a serious-looking middle-aged African-American woman, nodded solemnly and extended her hand to Mike. Over the following weeks, we resolved some minor details, and 3 months later, our divorce was finalized. 2 days post-divorce, I instructed Mike to initiate legal action against Jack's estate. I sought child support and college funds for Allison. Mike put it more eloquently. I might not have pursued this if Allison hadn't made it clear at the funeral that she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. After 18 years of raising her as my own, is this the gratitude I receive? But I suppose Allison had 4 years to ponder it after Tracy told her everything. To her, I was merely a fool. 14 years of being a real father squandered. So when Mike proposed compensating for the lost respect with tangible money, precisely $1 million, I was agreeable. I anticipated a call from CH once she was notified, but instead Tracy called. Chell must have thought I would handle the news better coming from Tracy, but she was wrong. Is this another attempt to get back at me? Are you experiencing financial troubles? Tracy questioned when I answered. Well, greetings to you too, Mrs. Avondale. How considerate of you to call. I'm fully aware of the motive behind your call, I replied. You do realize this makes you seem incredibly insensitive, don't you? She remarked. Are you aware that I spent 18 years raising someone else's child while you, Chell and Jack, had a great time at my expense, and now that child thinks I'm just a fool? I don't care about your views anymore. I hung up the phone without bidding farewell. I imagine Tracy must have communicated my attitude to Chell along with my obstinacy when I was convinced I was right. Initially, she tried to negotiate through her attorney, but ultimately sent me a check for $1 million. It turns out a few months later, Chell could easily spare that million because she sold Softel to a Japanese company for $8 million. With Jack no longer involved, it was probably a clever business move. That could have concluded the story, but as the former broadcaster Paul Harvey would say, and now for the rest of the story. 2 days after the sale of Softel, $2 million was deposited into an account under my name in the Cayman Islands. This amount was my finder's fee for Nakatomi successfully purchasing Softel within 9 months, as outlined in an agreement made by an unidentified Nakatomi lawyer and me. The conditions of the contract stated that, regardless of my actual involvement or the manner in which the acquisition occurred, as long as Nakatomi finalized the purchase by the set date, I would receive the finder's fee. However, once that date passed, the agreement would be void. At this juncture, you might be curious about my part in the Softel transaction. It's quite intricate, but essentially I wasn't completely transparent earlier in this story. While much of what I have related is based in truth, some parts were exaggerated, a portrayal by me that could rival an Academy Award-winning performance of appearing utterly unaware. Let me clarify, about a month before Jack passed away, I was totally in the dark about what was happening. Then, suddenly, a Nakatomi lawyer approached me seeking my help in brokering a deal with Jack for Softel. Why do you think I can assist, other than the fact that my wife is closely connected with Jack? I inquired, genuinely intrigued. The lawyer responded, we know you're clever and up to the challenge. You can outsmart the man who has been deceiving you for years and reaped the benefits. I was astounded by this. Tracy was being unfaithful, and this Japanese individual was aware of it. It was incredible. Nakatomi had thoroughly researched many firms, uncovering all they could. They knew plenty about Tracy Chell, and even their daughters. They correctly guessed that I would want to assist them, but they required my help promptly as they were considering other software companies, and I had 9 months to act. Initially, they showed me evidence of Tracy's infidelity. They provided photos, videos, phone logs, travel receipts, everything. I had the means to expose both of them. Then they offered me $2 million to aid them in seizing control of the company from Jack. Honestly, I was inclined to assist without the monetary incentive. But I kept that to myself. My main goal was to plan my actions and ensure the money would be mine after the divorce, avoiding any division since we live in a no-fault state. However, I needed to collect myself to avoid showing my cards too soon. My first, though brief, impulse was violent, waiting for their next rendezvous, breaking in, and taking extreme actions. But the idea of spending my life as someone's cellmate did not appeal to me. So I decided to stay composed, continuing to feign ignorance, a skill I had mastered over 2 decades. I briefed Ari on what I had discovered about Tracy and Jack, leaving out the details of my informant. We spent a late night at the factory, drinking Don Julio tequila and brainstorming solutions. After consuming about half the bottle, Ari sincerely said, "Isn't it ironic that the guy who invented How Crazy Tall has his wife cheating on him? You should have slipped her some of that stuff, Rick." That's when it dawned on me, though I kept my realization to myself. Given the circumstances, I should not have given it to her, I pondered quietly. I should have slipped some of that stuff to him. Wait a moment. One action resolves 2 issues. Crystal has a significant advantage. It doesn't have as many side effects as other major medicines. There's only one issue: men shouldn't take it at all. As long as they adhere to the prescription accurately, it's effective for reducing a woman's sex drive. However, for some reason, it elevates men's blood pressure significantly and can lead to a heart attack. All I needed to do was somehow administer it to Jack. Jack and I both play golf at the same course. Sometimes we play with 2 other guys. I arranged for us to play together the following Saturday and planned to stop at the restaurant for lunch after the first 9 holes. We had a great time playing the first 9 holes, then took an extended break for lunch and beverages before playing the second 9. Keep in mind, I have a talent for salesmanship, so while we were casually dining and drinking, I nonchalantly asked Jack, "Are you doing all right, buddy? You seem a bit worn out." Jack, being a decade older than the rest of us, was conscious of the age difference, and my question clearly affected him. I could see him reflecting when I suggested we could delay our tea time by 30 minutes to allow him some additional rest. "No, just slightly tired, but no need to alter plans for me." "I'll manage," he replied. Truth be told, I didn't think he appeared tired at all, but I decided to exploit his insecurities about being the oldest in the group. "I have just the thing for you," I said, producing a small bag of unmarked white pills from my pocket, something I keep for myself. Takes the edge off and keeps me going smoothly through the day. I passed Jack the small bag containing 5 pills. "Take one of these over the next few days if you like them. I can get you more next time we go golfing," I offered. Jack took 1 pill from the bag, swallowed it, and washed it down with bourbon on the rocks. He thumped his chest like a gorilla and let out a small Tarzan-like yell. "Let's go, guys. I'm feeling energized," he exclaimed cheerfully. In reality, within a short time, he probably did feel the effects of the pill. An increase in blood pressure can give you a boost, which is why athletes focus on getting energized for their games. However, too much of a good thing can be harmful. For those wondering why I gave him a small bag instead of a pill bottle or box, I wanted him to discard the bag once he finished the pills so it wouldn't be found if someone searched his pockets later. On Wednesday night, those 5 pills were meant to last until Wednesday, when Jack and Tracy usually met up. When a man's blood pressure is already elevated from being with someone other than his wife, and he takes medication that increases blood pressure further, it's a recipe for a heart attack, which could be deadly. But since it would appear like a regular heart attack, and our city's crime investigation unit is under-resourced, they wouldn't investigate unless something seemed unusual. So I acted like the betrayed husband, just like I did when I first learned about the affair a month ago. I must admit, even I surprised myself with how convincingly I acted. 2 days after the money was deposited into my account, and I moved it elsewhere, I took Ari and his spouse out to a fancy dinner. I acted as if it was to thank Ari for being a great leader and supporting me during tough times, but in reality it was to thank him for unknowingly aiding my revenge. With Jack out of the picture in both women's lives, the connection between Tracy and Chell noticeably cooled, especially as Chell had time to reflect on Jack's passing, which occurred practically in Tracy's embrace. I heard that Chell was particularly upset by Tracy's inability to persuade me to drop the lawsuit against the estate for overdue child support, although Chell seemed unaware that Tracy wouldn't have benefited from that money due to our recent divorce. Shortly after Chell settled my support payments, she terminated Tracy's employment. Word also spread within the Naomi circles about the affair between Jack and Tracy, effectively ruining Tracy's career in business administration. Apparently, it's not beneficial for one's career when the boss dies while in bed with you, or so I've been told. Don't grieve too much for Tracy, though she emerged from the situation with a net worth of approximately $1 million, so she won't be struggling financially for some time. Furthermore, she'll be able to support her daughter, speaking of whom, Allison clearly expressed that she no longer desired any association with me following Jack's passing. She rejected me not only once, but multiple times. I assume this is the result of all the years I spent nurturing her, providing for her, coaching her soccer teams, and being present at all her dance recitals. Well, I won't make that mistake again. As for myself, I believe I'm managing quite well for someone who lost their life partner after 20 years. It took some time, but I started dating again. However, I'm uncertain if I'll ever completely trust another woman or find someone like Tracy again. But now I have no obligations. I possess about $5 million, so I'm semi-retired and only engage in special projects for myself. Perhaps one day I'll create a pill that helps husbands determine if their wives are unfaithful. That would be really beneficial for people. Second story, I think I spotted my ex-partner's Reddit throwaway account. It's my first time posting. I was deceived by my ex-partner, who has been working overseas since 2016. I was unaware but sensed something off, tried to inquire with his deceptive co-workers, but they ignored me. In December 2023, some colleagues disclosed that my ex had been unfaithful since 2016. We have 2 teenagers. a 15-year-old girl, and a 14-year-old boy. So I attempted to mend things and proposed working on our marriage, but despite discovering the infidelity, he still hadn't unblocked me on social media. Things continued to deteriorate until last week when he furiously declared he was finished, telling me and the kids to leave him alone. He has a lot on his mind and doesn't care if my family despises him. Meanwhile, while browsing, I accidentally stumbled upon his account. He's now seeking advice. Additionally, his affair partner has children with different fathers and has been known as a homewrecker even before. My ex has also been involved with other family men. I'm aware he had an affair at his workplace with a very close friend of a colleague. I feel I have been portrayed as the villain by him to his colleagues. That's why nobody shows sympathy towards me. They concealed it for a long 8 years. Wow. Thank you for joining us in this chapter of Cheating Stories. If you were touched by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on the upcoming emotional rollercoaster of relationships. Your support is invaluable, and we can't wait to share more gripping stories with you. Until next time, remember that every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.